Today, I am talking all about basics of facial features. All you will need is a pencil, an eraser, and a piece of paper. What I'm starting out with today is how to draw a very basic eye. The human eye, the basic shape resembles a football, but the top arch of the football is much sharper than the bottom arch, and I'll get more into that later. What I'm drawing here would be that pink sort of muscle that you can see in the corner of people's eyes, including that, also including an arch for where the eyelid will be. The eyelid is something people forget pretty frequently, but if you don't include the eyelid, the person can start looking a lot like a lizard pretty quickly. So there's our eyelid, and then I'm moving into the iris, which is the colored circle of the eye. And this is a perfect circle, but it's cut off by the top eyelid. That is like the resting position of people's eyes, for it to be cut off by the top eyelid. And then including, for someone with light eyes, a defined pupil, so the black circle in the center, and then that other circle I drew indicates where the highlight would be were I to shade this eye. And this line that I'm drawing and then erasing and redrawing is indicating the bump where that muscle in the corner of the eye is. That bump is pretty important when you start to shade the eye. Here I'm showing you what not to do. So this football shape, you can see it's close to perfectly symmetrical. And what I was saying before was that the top arch should be steeper than the bottom arch. And here I'm showing you what not to do when drawing an iris. Unless the eyes open very, very wide, you will never be able to see the top of that circle. It will always be cut off by the top eyelid. All right, moving into another example. Drawing our little football shape, including that little pink muscle in the corner of the eye, the perfect circle that is the pupil, but again, I'm illustrating that this is a perfect circle, but you can't see the top of it because of the way the eyelid covers it. And speaking of the eyelid, also important to include a line for where that is. And then a little line indicating where that muscle, the bump in the corner of your eye, is going to be shaded. This person has a darker iris, so I'm not including the defined circle in the middle for where the pupil is. I'm just shading it all one color, which is an option for people with darker eyes. And there's our football shape. Again, I'm showing you that the top is a steeper arch than the bottom, which is a more realistic shape for eyes in most cases. The little pink muscle in the corner, the eyelid. These are the steps for how to draw a really basic eye. And then I'm including that iris, which again is cut off by the top eyelid. A little bump in the corner for where that muscle goes. And here I'm including some eyelashes. These eyelashes might be extensions. They look a little wild and crazy. And for all these features that I'm showing you how to draw today, the next step would be shading. I'm not going to get too much into shading today. We're just doing the basics. But to make these really look like real life features, you would have to include some shading. And here I do shade the iris. I add a jagged dark line around the iris before connecting the pupil and that jagged line with gray lines moving in the direction toward the pupil. And that's a really basic way of how to shade an iris. But like I said, this is not a shading video, so don't worry too much about that just yet. We are moving into a nose now. So when I start drawing a nose, I always start with the centerpiece, which is called the septum of the nose, or like the round bulbous part out at the end. That I always draw with a smile that is more steep or more flat, depending on the person. And then you add in the nostrils, and then the sides of the nose I just indicate with parentheses, so sort of curved lines on either side. And then that line that's going straight up indicates the bridge of the nose. But again, the bridge is done almost entirely with shading, so we're not going to get too much into that today. Over here, this is what not to do. Please don't draw the sides of the nose first. It just gets confusing. That's what not to do. Here's another example, though, of a wider nose, so a wider smile. before adding those little nostrils, the little hooks on the side. And then the side of the nose, again, are parenthesis lines. This next nose, the bulbous septum center part of the nose, is more narrow, and then the nostrils are wider, and noses come in all different shapes and sizes, so there's a lot of different combinations you could create here, and I invite you to try out some that I did not, and maybe to look at reference pictures and look at the people around you and see what noses really can look like. And this last nose example that I drew, the nostrils are not very visible because of the angle that the nose is at. But that's it for noses today. Just the basics today. And the last basic I'm talking about is how to draw a mouth. And when I draw a mouth, I always start with the line that separates the upper lip and the bottom lip. So that's what this line is supposed to be. And then after that, I move into the widest part of the lip is always in the center. Sometimes it dips down like this, other times it's arched like a frown. And then as you move out toward the corner of the mouth, the lips always get thinner. And you can connect it to the corner or you can leave it floating because the more concentrated part of the color of the lips is always toward the center. So sometimes as the lips get out towards the corners of the mouth, you can't really see the difference between the skin around the lip and the color of the lip because they sort of become the same color. I will explain that again, don't you worry. So here I'm showing you what not to do. So we're starting with the center, but that line is just straight across, which is just never the case when you're drawing a real mouth. And then I drew the top and bottom lip as simple arches, but they're exactly the same size, which really, again, never happens. They're always a little bit different, and usually the bottom lip is a little bit bigger. Here, again, I'm going into another nice example. This time I turned the corners of the lips up so it would kind of look like that person was smiling, before going into the top lip, which again, in the center is the widest, and as it moves towards the corner, it gets thinner. Speaking of the corner of the lips, I added some shadows here to make it look a little more realistic because the corners of the lips never just come to a point, it's always more of a rounded shadow there. And here I'm showing you what to do if you would like to make a smiling person who has their mouth open. So instead of just drawing a line this time, I'm drawing the opening of the mouth first before adding that upper lip, the bottom lip, and now we have to contend with those teeth, which can be scary to start with, but I'm going to show you a simple way to make them look not so scary. So I'm drawing the number of teeth that I think I would be able to see here, and thinking about the front teeth being bigger and then smaller as they get further away. And I'm not drawing lines up the center of the teeth. That I would do with shading later. I would leave this as it is. Don't draw the lines. Here I'm showing you what not to do. So starting out perfectly fine, the center opening of the lips, the top lip, the bottom lip, but do not draw teeth like this. Unless you're drawing a very stylized cartoon, this is not the way to go. All right, moving into another nice example. This time I'm drawing a wider smile, so you can see more teeth and a little bit of gums. And I'm keeping in mind that when someone is smiling this wide, sometimes the lips get stretched very thin, so I included some thin lips here. All right, this time since the smile is so wide, I can see a little bit of the gums. So these little triangles that I'm drawing are the little bits of gums that you can see at the top of the teeth. And then I'm including, just like the way I showed you before, the bottom line of the teeth and not connecting up with a line separating each individual tooth. That would be done with shading later on. And this is a pretty simple way to draw some teeth and not have them look too crazy scary. And same with the bottom teeth. Here I didn't include gums. Unless the smile is very, very wide, you usually won't see gums at the bottom row of teeth. And I included some little bumps for where the teeth are separated, but again, not drawing that line all the way down the tooth. All right, and again, I've said it over and over, shading would be the next step here, but that is a video for another day. In the meantime, before I post the shading video this week, please practice these features. See that I did not put them together. That I'm going to talk about again in another video. Let's take this step by step and learn chunks at a time how to do this. Portraits, which a portrait is drawing a person, can be a little bit intimidating. I'm breaking this down into more bite-sized pieces. This week, practice drawing the features. The features don't have to be connected. If you have questions, again, let me know. But this week, if this is the assignment you are choosing, you are to draw just a page full of features. So you decide how many times you need to practice for yourself until you're happy with how they're looking, but practice eyes, noses, and mouths, and I will talk to you all this week. Let me know if you have questions.